ready to turn your love for watches into a profitable business? Here's how you become a vintage watch dealer. Are you ready to learn about how to become a watch dealer in general, or I'd say more of a vintage watch dealer, because that's my specialty. A lot of people are asking me, how do you start? How do you become what you became, or how do you do it? We're going to cover quite a few lines today about what I am doing, how I'm doing it, and why is it for you or is it not for you. It's not as simple as just saying we're just gonna flip a few watches and just to make $500 or $1,000. It's not gonna change your life. The way I have developed this is that I'm highly sustainable, independent of what the market is really doing. At any point in the past, I'd say almost 15 years, it's been an increasingly demanding market where a lot of stuff has been going up in value over the past 15 years, including into vintage or modern or whatever you want to call it. But not only that, a lot of people have gotten into this market thinking that buying a watch or two watches a year, especially locally, I don't know why, but I feel like every single young person that owns a watch is a watch dealer in a way. And they're all trying to flip a watch, even buying it from an AD. A lot of people are telling you this on different platforms, or even TikTok or even YouTube. All that being said, let's dive in the video and let's go into more details about why, how, and why you should be really thinking really hard about what you're doing, because it's not all about just a few bucks. It's not something that you're gonna transform a love for watches into a business. Too many people talk to me about this again. It's not because you like watches that you're made to sell watches. Too many young kids come to me and they're like, yeah, I like watches. And I'm like, what do you know about watches? Well, not much, but I'm ready to learn. I'm like, okay, well, it's like liking cars. Okay, you have to actually learn about them. Don't become a doctor without the previous studies and without all the background that you might have. Watches is a bit different in a sense that you have to touch them, you have to be in contact with them. It's not only pictures. A lot of people just browse through Instagram stories, through Instagram pictures, or TikToks, or Mike Nouveau is really good at posting a lot of Cartier and a lot of really quirky stuff. You do have a lot of different big dealers out there. Nico is showing off a lot of Richard Milles and all of that. That's not what you're gonna start with. You gotta start with the basics, understand what a manual one watch is, what a quartz watch is, automatic, chronographs, chronometers. A lot of people mix chronometers and chronographs. You can look it up. It's pretty easy to do a bit of research. And all of that said, the basics of the basics is understanding and having the vocabulary and having a base to what you want to build. You're not going to build a house starting by the top. You're going to start with the foundation. Same thing here. You gotta talk the same language as I do. You come here and you pretend to be a dealer and all you know is 3 models of a watch. I'm gonna read right through you. I know you're not profound in your knowledge, okay? You gotta do your research. You gotta be passionate. I have a lot of times where I'm not sleeping, where I'm still thinking about watches, and that's been for the past 20, 25 years since I'm a kid. It's all about reading, going through stuff online, absorbing material. A lot of people might read about stuff and forget about it. Watches, it's all about details. So the more you know, the better chance you have actually to understand what you're dealing with in terms of quality, in terms of everything that a watch that's in front of you might be or might not be. You might think you're getting the deal of the century, and then you can say, hey, that dial is reloomed from a watch that could have been worth like $50,000 as a sub, gilt dial, underline, whatever you wanna. You can go into really, really high details. If the dial was touched up or reloomed or anything, that watch could be worth only $20,000. Okay, so if you think you're making 20,000 by buying it at 30, you might actually lose 10,000. And I'm just giving you one example out of many that can happen, and that's in the, I'd say, more of a higher tier of those watches. In the vintage, like, we don't get $50,000 watches every day. It's not as common as people might think in the vintage world, but I'd say it's something that's to be looked into, and you need to understand what you have in your hands. That's my one of my main points is always knowledge. I'll just give you an example of one of the watches that I got this week. We're gonna take a few pictures as well so you see it. Right here I have a Tudor Advisor 7926. The case has been slightly polished in the past, but the bezel is super clean. The lugs, I'm pretty sure they might have been polished in the past, but it's very clean overall. Caseback is untouched. It's one of the cleanest ones I've seen, and I've had a few in the past. The crowns are the correct ones, which is a feature of those watches. The crowns are not screwed on. What happens? I buy a lot of watches on pictures. I can tell the watch is possibly very clean. But then when I looked at the pictures more thoroughly, because I make offers basically on the spot, it might take me like 3 to 5 seconds to actually make an offer on those watches with certain guys or certain suppliers. It has a little defect at the bottom. A bit of the matte paint is gone. Otherwise, the hands are perfect. The rest of the dial is perfect. The case is pretty damn good. Overall, this watch could have been here, one of the top ones on the market in terms of condition, but then we see a few little defects. So it's going to be priced accordingly to the fact that there's a little defect on the dial. They're not common. We get a lot of Tudors in Canada just because Tudor was the lower end of Rolex. But overall, this could have been an exceptional watch. Now it's very good, but it's not perfect. We need to know that condition is key in this element that we're dealing with here. It's not only something that's going to be monetary. Even though you have something really rare, as soon as you have a couple of little defects, it's just going to cut away maybe 60% of the population that might have been actively looking for that watch, just because of those little defects that might seem really minor for a lot of people, but in this world it's very important. Again, it's all about knowledge. It's all about assessing the watch correctly and saying, hey, you know what, this is what it is. It's not perfect, but I have to admit the good and the bad. That's what a good basics in this industry is going to do. It's going to be like, hey, you know what, you're going to click right away with a lot of knowledge, a lot of research. You're going to say, well, look, I'm buying it, it's okay, but there's what it is. My second point about becoming a watch dealer, which is very important, is that you have to actually start small, stay focused on a few things. I know that a lot of people don't come from rich families and they want to start, and that's fine. So no one's going to give you 100, 200,000 or $500,000 to play with. You're going to have to start obviously with the stuff that actually sells quickly and that's going to move quickly, but I'd say stay focused onto that, but keep on learning, because a lot of people, even after 5, 10 years that I've known them, flipping watches left and right, they're still stuck in the same idea of they just a Cartier Santos, Speedmaster, and a few other models. Is it good? It pays the bills, you know. After a certain while, it's you will have done the same thing maybe 30, 50, 100 times. It just becomes something of a second nature when you do those things. But the whole idea, if you really want to stand out from the crowd, is actually to learn stuff. And that's why we're coming back to the point one, is that yes, you have to start small, do this, but to actually grow, you'll need to learn, you'll need to educate yourself even further. But the starting point is start with $5, $10,000, $20,000, and you'll find out that even $100 or $500,000 is not enough in this business. We're always broke. That's how it works. Don't be deceived by the fact that maybe another dealer has more inventory or has better stuff than you. You'll get there if you are committed to what you're doing. The commitment is very important, and you have to be stable mentally and stable and focused throughout what you're doing. If you're repeatedly or constantly saying, hey, I'm going to do this, and you're doing the inverse or something different, people are not going to take you seriously. If, for example, you're going to pay a day just today, I'll give you an example, $4,500, and the same customer comes back to you a day later and you tell them, I'll give you $3,800, you might lose that customer. You know, you have to remember what you offered, what you said, what you did, what people told you. So you have to really understand what it is. If you're not a that has a good memory or whatnot, keep yourself tabs, notes of what you said or what you did with that person, not to fuck up. It's really easy to mess up a relation based on maybe a misunderstanding, or you said this, you said that, or I did this, or I did that. Right off the bat, you might shoot yourself in the foot from the beginning. Overall, you have to be very, very focused on what you're doing. I'm just giving you a few examples, but from what you know to what you're doing with every single one of your customers, you have to stand out in terms of service. I don't believe that, for example, I was talking to people earlier this week about the fact that Rolex, Vacheron, Lange, and all those big players in the luxury watch industry are all starting or aiming for boutique only experience, and they're going to focus on that. Is it good? In a way it is for them, but for the customer I find that having a retailer of jewelry that has also watches is going to create a much stronger bond than just going to one watch store where the turnover of employees is going to be much greater. Also, for example, if you're working with Rolex or whatever brand it might be, or Hublot, if they decide to go that route, what's going to happen is that the systematic service that you're going to get is going to be very, very controlled, and it's going to be routinely the same, you know. The relation you might have with a jeweler that's really close to you, and that or that has been selling jewelry to your family for 20, 30, 40 years, you might actually lose that over the years. So that's one thing that actually is a bit deceiving with the market, and I find that if you do give a good service as a second-hand dealer, you're going to keep your customers much closer to you than someone who's going to be a lot more focused on the corporate type of business where it's very cold. What do you want? What do you want to buy? And here you pay and you go. So I don't accept that kind of service. I find it very impersonal. And if you are able to actually give that kind of service from the beginning to the people around you without being greedy, without being abusive of, you know, the position that you have where you can actually suggest certain watches to your customers, and you're not, you know, you're not taking advantage of the fact that you can actually oversell watches. I never try to do that. There's no point into doing that. You will keep your customers for a very long time throughout the next 10, 20, 30 years if you're really committed to this business. The one thing also that you might consider really early on, which a lot of people don't, is that you have to do it legally, okay? The most important part at the beginning of your journey into this business is actually that you have to do your due diligence and do your studies about how to open a business, how do you keep up with inventory. For example, my structure in the inventory is a bit different than normal just because I might take a lot of watches apart for parts or whatnot. You know, whatever you get at the end of the year in terms of sales, plus you calculate your inventory, you approximate your inventory. It's something that I've been doing for many years. I'm working with the IRS or the local Revenu Quebec, and you know, you're able to structure that correctly. But for a newcomer, it might be overwhelming. It might be extremely hard to do even the simple task of keeping track of your sales, of what you did or what you're doing. The next thing that's extremely important with this is that you keep all your bills. You do keep track of all your sales. Obviously, in Canada, over $30,000 a year in sales means you need to have sales taxes. You need to register. Your registry to taxes might take a few weeks. You know, your registry to your company might also take a few weeks, if not up to a month. Then find an accountant. Then I know people that had a lot of problems lately opening an eBay account that's registered as a business. I never really did have a problem before. It was much easier. Today they're checking you up. They want your information like 5 times if they need to. They might be blocking your payments. Even me, it happened not too long ago. I think for 2 items not received, and it wasn't my fault, it was FedEx's fault. They blocked almost $70,000, $80,000 over a span of 2 weeks, you know. It might not seem a lot, $70,000, $80,000, but it's, you know, it's a lot of money, and we needed to roll the business to turn, you know, our inventories. In some cases, you might have problems with PayPal, with Wise, with everyone. So there's a lot of compliance systems that are being added to every single business and every single platform of payment that you might use. And you have to actually update that and be in communication with them. If, let's say, 1 month you're doing $10,000 of sales and the next month you're doing $150,000 of sales, well, they might look into you and ask you a ton of questions. You need to be prepared to answer them. Don't lie. If you lie, you're going to be banned. You're going to be booted out of the system. So it's very important that you are straight up with them and you're telling them, hey, look, I'm having an increase in my business. This is what happens. It might be a few times like this a year, or it might be a continuous increase over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. You don't know, but you have to communicate with those platforms and those payment utilities you're going to use. The next most important part, once you get to a certain level of turnover, of being very thorough with what you're doing, is that you're going to need to invest into tools and into something that's going to help you on every day. You're going to see on my desk, since I've been doing videos, that I have a set of Bergeron tools here, the screwdrivers. Those are the basic ones. Obviously, don't go with Chinese screwdrivers. You're gonna mess up, obviously, the screwdrivers, but you're also gonna mess up the watch that you're trying to size or you're trying to open. It's not suggested you try and save money on tools. If you need to pay $500 for something, just pay it. Be glad you're going to be using it. It's going to save you a lot of time, and it might save you a lot of energy by using the proper tools. The next thing that's also important when you're doing, let's say, more high-end watches is, for example, a Geiger counter. I've been disclosing what it does in a past video if you want to watch it and you want to check what it does. But a Geiger counter is extremely important, especially to see if you're not sure of a watch from the 50s, if it was reloomed or not. The relooming normally is going to be tritium, okay, or some sort of a green loom that's not very sexy in most cases. This is going to tell you, hey, is it good or is it bad? And you're going to be certain in most cases if the watch is all original. The dials and hands are extremely important for certain vintage watches. The next thing also is you're going to need the loop. I have just a basic loop again. This is a Bergeron one. I think it's an X10 times 10. You might want to use a times 5 or times 10 depending on what you're going to be using. This is also something that you might need on a daily basis if you want to look at watches. This is a pretty basic one. You can go crazy. You can buy a $150, $200 loop. Look, I have one right here. This is a Chinese one. It has everything that you ever want, from from being much bigger. You have a focus. Basically, you can get closer or farther from the item itself. So you can turn. You have, just give me a second. I think the battery just died on me, but you have UV light, you have white light, and you have a yellow light as well. And this is something that on bigger watches or something that's of greater value, you might want to use it by holding in your hand really steady and you look at the watch. That's something that you might want to use. I think those are maybe $150, $200 online. Is it worth it? Yes. If you're willing to go that route, then if you're starting to open watches, you might want to start cleaning the dial. Watch out. If the loom is partially going, you might want to clean it up, and you might just make the whole loom go if you're going too close to the dial. Okay, so use those with caution. Then you might need the the regular tools just to hold a band, and this is just to size regular watches, including a lot of the Omegas have pins, a movement holder or case holder. This is a Bergeron. This is pretty expensive. If you're going into also opening watches, you have the basic one, that's a pocket one. This one is pretty easy to use. This is one from the 50s. If not, you can go with something crazier, and then you might use the Rolex tools. or you might use, this is made in Japan, the Vigor. Okay, this is adapted with a Rolex opener as well as the regular bits to open watches. It's very vast. You can go really crazy with tools. I have adapted myself buying like 10, 15, 20 watchmaker lots over the past 20 years. It's not going to be very expensive. You might spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on the lot, and out of the lot you might be actually buying the whole lot for maybe one tool or two tools. The rest you might have doubles or triples. Is it required? Maybe. If you do like me, if you buy maybe 50 watches, 75 watches a month, you might need different tools. For example, once I used this Vigor tool right here just because it was, sadly, someone misthreaded one of the two doors that I bought, and I had to put all my weight on the whole tool. And I had, actually, I was back then with someone, and I told the guy, look, I'm going to put my whole weight and start turning me, with the whole tool. So this was able to hold me in place. I found a point of equilibrium, and the person was just turning me, and I managed to open that case. We got lucky, there was no damage, but when that happens, it might happen, So those tools are important on an everyday basis. You cannot just go to your watchmaker every time you need to remove a piece of dust under a crystal or on the dial itself, or simply just opening the watch to see if everything is legit, if there's no traces of over oiling, a bit of rust. A lot of people are really scared about rust. I'd say vintage watches in most cases, except most probably if you're in South America, or most probably in Miami, or really close to the islands or close to the water, I've never really seen a lot of watches that don't show water damage without actually opening it. We normally see rust that's creeping from under the dial. We see a lot of signals or damage signs right away. There's rarely a case where I've opened the watch and it's all rusted, but everything is perfect from the outside. Everyone tells me, can you send me a picture of the movement? I'm so afraid of rust. And it doesn't happen. So that's why, like, little tricks like that you might pick up with time or with all your experience, you're gonna know what's up with a watch even without handling it or having it on hands. Just because you have that experience doesn't mean you're not gonna make mistakes, doesn't mean I'm not making mistakes. I do make a lot of mistakes throughout the year. Sometimes it's in my favor, which again, you might be lucky. That's part of the luck of the business. But in certain cases you might be totally unlucky, and then you might lose your shirt. Actually, with a bad experience, you might lose all your enthusiasm for being a business or having a business in this industry. A lot of people might, if they lose 5 or 10,000, it might be catastrophic for them, in this industry. For me, losing 5 or 10,000 is to be expected throughout the year. You're trying not to lose much more than that. You might be frauded. You might be, there's so many things going on. So that's why I'm going a bit off path right now, but that's why you have to understand that tools are important, and everything that you're accumulating with the knowledge of using those tools or opening the watches or of checking them is going to contribute to you not getting scammed, to you not losing money down the road. You have to understand that it's all tied in together. You might see a watch, okay, after a certain time and say, hey, there's something wrong. I cannot pinpoint what the problem is, but there's something wrong with the watch. And that's when your experience is gonna talk. It's not like, hey, this is wrong because of this or because of that, because I read on the forums that this or that. In a lot of cases, you might be wrong just because you misread, or someone says something that's false. Overall, we're going back to the same thing, is the fact that your experience is gonna do a lot of help to your business. One of the most important part is how to balance your finances. After all of your experience, then you're gonna need to know, hey, how does it work? Do I only want to hold 5 watches, 10 watches? I never really questioned myself. I always bought whatever was proposed to me if the price was correct. I don't really make that choice. I have suppliers to which I'm tied, and when I make an offer, if the offer goes through, I have to pay for the watch. A lot of people call this mazal, but it's 100% an unwritten rule. You don't have to break mazal, and obviously, like, if there's something that they did wrong, they didn't give you a certain information about something, or the pictures were not properly taken, you might back out of the deal because it's fake, because of this, because of that. But in general, you cannot break mazal, including the fact that you might lose money on the deal. That's the tying part of the business. If you're happy to make money, you should also consider the fact that if you're accepting to make money, you're also accepting to lose money in certain cases. It is a business. That acceptance is not only, okay, I take, and when it doesn't work, I get out and I'm done. It's not the way it works. You have to do a lot of due diligence again and work with the proper people. You don't want to get scammed. You want to keep the ball rolling. If the guy that sells to you is happy because he's supplying you, you're making him a living, he's making you a living. So it's a bit of give and take. You cannot just be the one making money and the other person doesn't. That balance, that equilibrium for yourself is very important. Also, your risk factor. What's your risk factor? Are you willing to take more of a risk and try different things? A lot of people tell me I'm not buying this just because I don't have a customer for it. What does that mean? It means the person is not willing to take any risk. It doesn't mean they don't have a customer. I've always sold everything that I ever had before. Might it be audio equipment that I used to sell before, I'm still selling, or might it be watches, okay? I was never really stuck with inventory. Even if it means to lose money, take the loss, move on. It's a learning process. You're always gonna learn. Even if you lose $5,000, it's not the end of the world. You're gonna make it back. The only thing you're losing is you're losing time, yes, which is a lot of effort, but that's gonna be up to you. If you really want to take zero risk, you're gonna stick with the Datejust, the Batmans, the Submariners, Daytona every now and then, and you're gonna be stuck with the same kind of inventory that everyone works with. Is it something that that's enticing for me? Not really. I was always a bit more of a risk taker. That's why I buy parts. That's why I buy a bit of everything, just because it just teaches me every time I buy something. Even if it's a mistake, I'm gonna learn not to do that mistake a second time, and you're just moving on. And sometimes it's a really good example or a good experience where you're doing a lot better than you did, and that's when it's also enticing to actually go outside of the regular beaten path that everyone takes. All of that said, for example, if you're buying a Speedmaster, in this case it's a rose gold one, that one is going to be on the website very shortly. As you can tell, it's all rose gold. This one was left by a customer buying on consignment, not because I didn't want to buy it, I want to buy it, but it has a certain price. This one was just serviced by Omega. The one detracting part of this watch is that the buckle is a non-original buckle. The strap is made by Diametris, a friend of mine who closed his company a few years back, but the straps are really amazing as well. But you see, in this case, we're gonna be real aggressive around, I think 11.5 US, so around 15,000 Canadian is gonna be the selling price on this watch. Everyone else is asking 19, 20, 25,000 on those ones. This one is a broad arrow, a blue dial, and it's something that you don't see every day. I'm doing this to help a friend, okay? He needed the money, he left it at a pawn shop, and then, things happened where he couldn't pay. Anyway, long story short, he wants to get out of it. He has a lot of money tied up into his watch here, and I have a few other watches of his. But what that means is that, you make choices in your life, and it brings you sometimes to, pretty massive losses. It happens, okay? So in this case, I feel bad for him, and I want to help him get as much as possible. It's the case of a lot of people where they make certain mistakes. This was a personal mistake, not a business mistake, but it could affect you as well, where you're going to be tied up into a watch and you might need to lose a lot of money to get out of it in that moment of your life or that moment of your business. My stronger part of the business is that I am very adaptable as a person. First of all, financially. Second of all, if the market goes a certain way, you can choose the path that it goes. A lot of people are telling me, hey, do what everyone does. I'm like, no, I don't want to do only Speedmasters, Submariners, and Dayjusts all day long. It's a bit boring. My comfort zone is that I want to learn every day. I want to see something different every day. If it purely becomes transactional, I don't need to be there anymore. My experience, my background, everything that I did for the past 25 years learning about watches is meaning nothing if it only becomes a transaction of maybe 20 or 30 different models that are just condensated in the same type of business that's very repetitive. A lot of people can replace me if I would do only that, but they cannot replace me with all my knowledge at the moment or at this moment in my business. Why? Because it might seem very kind of superficial to talk only about a few models, but if it comes to me, for example, I'm gonna have a watch that's really rare for sale in the next few weeks, and that's a Mito Centigraph with a double signature on the dial. That one comes from Cuba, and it's really interesting because the watch was actually part of a club. As you know, the US used to have cabarets and bars and restaurants galore in Cuba and Havana. That one is signed with the club name on the dial. Why am I attracted by such a watch? Because it's most probably unique. Most probably I'm the only one on the planet that has it for sale. It's in unpolished condition. Is the dial perfect? It's not perfect, but it's very clean. You know, it has the proper hands. The whole thing overall is very good. It's just gonna come out of service in next week and I'm really proud to actually being able to offer such a thing on the market. Not because it's something of money. Yes, no, I'm running a business, but it's also the fact that I was able to buy the watch, and that's what envelops everything that I just said earlier, is the fact that the people who actually find those watches and offer them to me, we have a really strong relation. We're human beings, and I have the chance to actually own something that you'll never see again in your lifetime, you know? And that's what makes us proud of doing what we're doing, is actually to offer something that's never seen before, that will never be seen again on the market. And it's not something of extreme value, but it's something that a collector will strongly appreciate, and I will also appreciate as well. I have a lot of fun finding watches. It's something that I really, really enjoy. And for example, this week's favorite is the Planet Ocean with the 8500 movement. I haven't had this one in a while, and because this one I believe is the 43 millimeter case, it's so attractive. The fact that the bezel is faded by the company, and the fact that the watch is very, very clean. It's just been worn maybe a few weeks or over a month. The case is unpolished. It has box and papers, has the open back, case back, and visually it's a very attractive watch. And that's why when you're into watches, that you have to kind of like what you're doing, and you kind of have to like what you're selling as well. And that's why I find that this week's nicest watch that I had in terms of, let's say, every day would be this one. Obviously, as Speedmaster, I've had a ton of them in the past. I still have maybe 6 or 7 right now, but it's kind of boring to talk about those. Yet the, you know, the Seamaster Professional is something interesting overall, and it's very competitive with the Rolex at most probably about a third of the price of a similar Rolex if you're going into the Sea Dweller comparatives, you know. That kind of covers it all for this week. If you do have more questions, ask me, you know, whatever I think. I'm going to be trying to be thorough. I'm not going to answer to 10 questions in a row. If there's something that bugs you, that's really concerning you about opening a business, I'll tell you right away. Is it an easy market? No, it's not. Is it something that's going to be feasible overnight? No, you're not going to be making millions right off the bat unless you're really well connected, unless you have a huge influx of money from your relatives or your family. And even then you could really lose your shirt over that if you don't know what you're doing. It's not magical. It's buying right, selling right, being able to repeat business. If you buy a watch like this and you're overselling it by 10%, you're trying to buy it for 30% less than what a customer bought it from you a month later, you know, you're not doing a good business. You're not going to try to keep the customer close to you at that point. You're just going to try to burn your customers one after the other. And it's not something that you're going to be fulfilling yourself with. I see a lot of people that appeared in the past 5, 10 years in the business. A lot of them disappeared. A lot of them are doing it the wrong way, I find. Some guys are doing it the right way and they're really nice about it. Do your due diligence, be yourself, don't be a crook, don't try to be someone who you're not. One thing also, don't try to flash too much. I find that those dealers are extremely obnoxious. You're still a middleman. You're nothing else than that. You have to remain humble. You have to remain a human being. You're not on top of anyone. Your customers are kings. They're the ones paying your bills and making you a living. So you have to be really nice to them. If they're stepping out of bound, don't be afraid to tell them, hey, look, you know what? Let's keep it real. Let's keep it, nice. But I've had people where I told them, look, I have some personal things, for example, that I'm going through lately, and that's why I didn't do a video last week. You have to know your limits. You have to know the limits of your customers, and you have to be very thorough. So I think I covered very important basics. I'm really broad, so if you do need to know about certain things or about certain ways of doing things, just give me a call or text me and I'll be more than glad to help you guys out. Have a good one, subscribe, and please like if you really enjoyed the video.